Hi, I'm Jack from Make Me a DJ, and in this video we're going to be working on some Detroit electro style snares. Right, so I wanted to cover a few different angles on this subject and advanced techniques of how you can get the right kind of snare going for the right kind of track. Just now I've got this Detroit electro style sound and track together. If you just take a listen to what we've got so far. Cool, so I know most people watching this video are probably going to be wanting to ask about the bass line, but don't worry, that's coming up a little bit later on in the video. So just for now, I wanted to focus on a few different options for snares. So what we're going to do is first focus on like a bicep style snare, almost a little bit like burial or whatever, where you can kind of get a bit more of a breakbeat kind of vibe, like a pitched up acoustic snare. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to go a little bit more down the classic route, so that classic kind of Detroit 808, and have a little look at layer and drums as well. So over on the left-hand side in the sidebar, I'm just going to type in snare, and what I'm looking for is like an acoustic style, almost like a hip-hop snare, and I'm going to throw that in and just get that dragged in on a simpler onto a fresh MIDI channel. So what I'm going to do now is just draw in some MIDI notes on the 2 and the 4, and that's just going to give us that two-step vibe to kind of two-step to while we're listening to the track. Right, so that's doing its job. I just cut a little bit of that low end frequency out as well. But the only problem is it sounds a little bit too acoustic, like it's being played from like an actual real drummer. So I'm going to pitch it up by 10 semitones and just see how it sounds now. So there you go. Hopefully you can see the vibe there. It kind of gives us a little bit more like bicep style or a little bit more like burial kind of style. We could probably get away with pushing it up 2 more semitones as well and just give it another play. So what I want to do now is add a little bit of reverb to this, and in my auto load I always have a drum room reverb set up on my B send. So I'm just going to dial a little bit of that B send in there just on that snare. We should start to hear the reverb effect. So that gives us the desired kind of sound that we're after. It definitely gives us that sort of bicep, kind of garage, kind of breakbeat vibe that we're looking for. But if we want to add swing to this, what I can do is I can double click just in the MIDI clip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the left-hand side and add some MPC swing, which I've already got set up in my groove pool. Now, the way that swing works is when you hit this button over here called commit, what it's going to do is it's going to push all of those MIDI notes across to add that sort of swing to them. Now, what I want to do is I want to dial in my own swing, and what we're looking to do is get like a bit of a push and pull motion going on. So I'm going to make this snare here just a little bit early, so I'm just going to pull it off the grid just a little bit over, and this one over to the right to the second. So what we've got is 1 early and 1 late. So we just give that a play and see how it sounds. More drastic. But it sounds cool when you rein it in a little bit, and that's kind of the sweet spot. So we've got this like nice kind of push and pull motion going on with our snare. It's kind of got its own groove, if you like, and it adds this bit more human element into our track. Now that we've got our MIDI clip sorted and our MIDI down, we can actually change the sound of the snare. If we're going for more of a classic kind of Detroit electro style sound, what I can do is just pull up an 808 snare and get this down, and then just drag that in there. So yeah, it's always a good idea just to set your envelopes properly whenever you add anything into a simpler. So I want to layer this with an 808 clap now. So I'm just going to search for an 808 clap in the sidebar, and I'm going to right click and go to group. And if I click this little list on the left hand side, that's going to allow me to start layering drums on here, and I can add as many layers as I like. So I'm just going to grab this 808 clap now and drag this on here, and what you can see is both of these audio samples is being triggered by this one MIDI channel, which is quite handy. And the good thing about this is it's going to allow us to add that transient snap to the snare drum that we've already got. So that's the clap on its own, and we're just shaping the envelope. Cool, now let's try them both together. Perfect. So to me, that sounds like we're filling out the frequency spectrum a little bit. We've got a bit of low, mid, punch, and we've also got a snap and clap, which sits a little bit further up the spectrum. So to make this as loud as possible, I'm going to drop a limiter down on here. I'm actually going to just push the gain a little bit, and that's going to make it a little bit louder in the mix. That's sounding good, and now that we've got our snare in place, I wanted to focus a little bit more on the bass line itself. I have covered vintage electro style bass lines in a previous video before, but I thought it'd be worth just scanning through this and showing you my process of how I've ended up with what I've got. I'm actually using this Juno preset, and I've got it grouped in 2 different channels. So one of them is sitting an octave below, and one of them sitting an octave above. Now, in analog, you can't actually have a sub oscillator, so that's why I've kind of done it that way. And it's all being triggered by this arpeggiator on a 16th kind of rhythm. If you take a look at the MIDI notes, that's kind of how they look, and those are being chopped up by the arpeggiator on that 16th rhythm that's giving us that feel of the bass line being quite sort of busy. So I'm just going to solo the sub layer so you can take a listen. So I've got that one filtered down a little bit. Let's take a listen to the other one. So this top one, I've got the filter frequency mapped to an LFO. So that's what's giving the bass line its kind of movement and interest, really. That sweep on the filter with the LFO moving gently up and down is what's kind of giving it its groove. But what I wanted to focus on in the final part of this video is sidechain compression. Now, I would imagine most people watching this video are familiar with what a sidechain does. Generally, it's to pull the volume away from whenever the kick plays so that the bass line doesn't clash with the kick. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to set up a normal sidechain compressor. So that's cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this to Kick SC, for instance. I'm going to throw down another compressor on here, and this is a little bit of an advanced sidechain compression technique, and not a lot of people actually tend to do this, but what I'm going to do is rename this one to Snare SC. And what we're going to do is we're going to sidechain to the snare, and that's going to give a little bit more sort of room within the groove. So I'm going to highlight the sidechain, select our snare from the list, which is actually track 15, which is just here. And that's going to listen to the snare. Now, when we come back over to the bass, if I just start to pull the threshold down, just pay attention to the gain reduction meter, and we'll try to find a bit of a sweet spot. there we go. Not only have we sidechained to our kick drum, we've also sidechained to our snare, and that's given us that little bit more dynamic and that little bit more space, and it's making our groove sound that little bit more cohesive as well. So hopefully you've learned something from today's video. Main takeaways from it are layering drums and also using sidechain in a more creative way as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.